Good day, Helldivers, and welcome to the 4th mandatory report from the Super Earth Equipment Testing Division. In accordance with orders from the Ministry of Defense, our operatives were deployed to assist with the recent liberation of Mastia from the undemocratic automaton host. During the course of 8 test missions, our operatives were equipped with SC-34 Infiltrator Armor, the R-2124 Constitution Marksman Rifle, the P-4 Senator Revolver, and G-10 Incendiary Grenades. In the way of stratagems, our Helldivers had access to napalm strikes from their Eagles, ARC-3 Tesla Towers, GL-21 grenade launchers as their support weapons, and AX guard dogs in the standard AR-23 configuration. Now for a statistical rundown of this equipment selection. Let us turn to our super intern, who has just returned from the medbay following a successful mission on the planet Darsh, where he has gotten some first-hand super experience with the automaton threat.
Greetings, Helldivers. Today we'll discuss the R-2124 Constitution, the P-4 Senator, and the ARC-3 Tesla Tower. The R-2124 Constitution is a bolt-action marksman's rifle, reminiscent of the pre-democratic rifles. It is given to all citizens at the age of 16 to encourage enlistment with the Sea Forces. It is affixed with a bayonet, improving melee damage and range. Has an AP rating of level 3, meaning that this rifle will penetrate through medium armored combatants without any issues. However, it will struggle against the heavies. I would like to point out that this weapon is a round reload, meaning that once you finish its 5-round capacity, you're going to be individually putting in rounds next. This process is slower than putting an entire clip in, thus slowing you down in the battlefield. Seated operatives recommend making each shot count. Slow down and allow your enemies to make themselves easy targets. Once they're close and you have no ammo, use the bayonet to go down swinging, just as our founders intended. The P-4 Senator is quite possibly an anomaly in the battlefield, with an AP rating of level 4, which is much higher than other sidearms. You're sure to tear through the heavy armor with no problem at all. However, there's only 6 shots available before you have to reload. So if you're on the field using the Senator, I'd recommend emptying the clip. That way you can use your Super Earth standard issue reloader. If you don't do so, you will have to reload each round individually. This will slow you down and get you killed. I will say that despite that being an issue, you'll never have to worry about losing ammo when you reload, because you only need to get rid of spent shells. CETA would like to remind Helldivers that to use the Senator, you must acquire the War Bond codenamed Steel Veterans, which requires the use of issued super credits. CETA Command recommends Helldivers pay attention to the following before calling down the stratagem. The ARC-3 Tesla Tower is a special sentry that fires electric arc blasts to all combatants within a 20-meter radius. This includes Helldivers, so be very careful around this. That includes any super interns. The stratagem does not offer an AP rating, however. There is reason to believe that this sentry does at least stun enemies carrying a rating of level 4 and will stun and kill those with lower armor ratings. This may not be accurate at the time of this report, as our enemies are always adapting. This sentry, along with other arc weapons, has the unique trait to chain through enemies. This makes the Tesla Tower an excellent stratagem for crowd control. If you're going to take this sentry, I personally recommend using arc-resistant armor, which can reduce your chances of a swift death by 95% in some cases. This concludes the analytical segment of the report. Now, I need to get my leg fixed before my next assignment.
Thank you, Super Intern. You may now complete getting your limbs reattached with honor. Turning now to our statistical analysis, we will start with the weaponry, specifically the Constitution Marksman Rifle. This unique historical replica rifle proved to have a learning curve for our operatives, as its low magazine capacity and iron sights rather than holographic take some practice. But once they got used to its quirks, the Constitution proved quite useful against lower-ranking automatons, easily dispatching of troopers and commissars with 1 or 2 shots to center mass, and berserkers with 3 or 4. Devastators proved slightly more challenging, but well-placed headshots could quickly eliminate these greater threats. One of the more unique aspects of this rifle, however, is the affixed bayonet, which Helldivers showed great pleasure in using to charge smaller enemies in order to conserve their limited magazine capacity. Unfortunately, the Constitution has very little use against massive enemies such as hulks and tanks, having only a medium armor penetration rating. This is a common thread throughout this loadout, with the grenade launcher also proving mostly ineffective against massive enemies, while being highly useful against lighter targets. Our operatives made great use of this weapon, especially when dealing with scout striders, as the concussive blast from its 40mm shells was enough to shatter the pilot's vital processors. A few operatives were even able to land a number of hits on gunships with this weapon, though it was far from the most effective use of their ammunition. Operatives voiced that the fully automatic firing mode was incredibly helpful when dealing with roving patrols. The grenades could even be used to destroy automaton fabricators if aimed properly. Unfortunately, the grenade launcher's projectiles seem to ricochet directly off the armor of hulks. In fact, the most effective portion of this loadout against massive targets proved to be the sidearm. The Senator's heavy armor penetration was far from a miracle worker. However, these high-powered projectiles easily tore through anything lesser than a hulk. It could even hold its own against a tank, with one of our operatives even managing to destroy one of these armored behemoths with a few well-placed shots to the main turret. The only drawback of the Senator is its low capacity. Though with the ability to load rounds into the speed loader individually, or to reload an empty cylinder with a speed loader, a fresh half-dozen full metal jacket votes is never far away. Less useful against armor, and yet still highly effective against lesser foes, is the incendiary grenade. The wide radius and constant damage, along with its ability to destroy fabricators, made this throwable invaluable to our operatives. Likewise, napalm strikes filled a similar battlefield role while providing a form of aerial denial. It still was not particularly effective, however, against massive units, but with a particularly precise bombing run. These shells were observed destroying a fabricator with a direct projectile hit. The simple stratagem code and rapid response time from Eagle 1 also greatly assisted the effectiveness of this stratagem, according to our operatives. Another highly effective item was the Guard Dog, especially due to the generally low capacity of all weapons our Helldivers were armed with. This drone could quickly and accurately dispatch of lighter forces such as troopers and berserkers. It also proved slightly effective against Devastators, with the exception of heavy Devastators, as their freedom-defying shields require greater penetration than a standard AR-23C can provide. Regardless, the Guard Dog came in incredibly handy during bayonet charges and when Helldivers needed to reload or otherwise perform another democratic action. Unfortunately, the same could not be said for the Tesla Tower. While somewhat helpful on occasion against fodder enemies, the prevalence of automaton ranged weaponry tended to trivialize this sentry, and it could very quickly be destroyed. Fellow Helldivers also found themselves frequently wandering into range of the arcs, which tended to end poorly for them. Operatives found the best use of this stratagem was to wait for a dropship to arrive, then throw the Tesla Tower approximately where enemy reinforcements would land to temporarily distract them and moderately thin their ranks. In the way of averages, across 8 missions our operatives managed to acquire an average of 218 confirmed kills, with an average accuracy of 50.65%. Unfortunately, fatalities tended to be high, with the division losing an average of 3 operatives per mission, with just under 1 friendly fire incident on average. As of this report, those numbers are equivalent to our division's general averages against the automaton menace since the beginning of these public reports. Finally, let us calculate the EES score for this loadout. For operator enjoyment, our Helldivers gave this loadout an 8 out of 10. They described the act of charging the enemy, quote, exhilarating. Those surviving operatives did note how having to run from hulks on a regular basis was quite frustrating. Deceased operatives had no comment on the matter. In the way of effectiveness, our analytical team gave this equipment selection a 6 out of 10. They cited how more effective marksman options such as the Diligence variants would likely prove far more useful due to their higher capacity, and the presence of scopes would allow for more accurate ranged engagements. They also cited how having a rocket sentry would most definitely have met operator needs when managing hulks and greatly outweighed the value of the Tesla Tower in comparison. Finally, in the way of synergy, this loadout scores a 5 out of 10. While little of the equipment proved directly harmful to allies during missions, it is most optimized for a scouting role rather than that of a team-oriented frontliner. As a result, our operatives most often avoided shared engagements with their teammates and instead would allow them to act as a distraction while charging objectives. That leaves this particular set of selections by the super algorithm with an ease score of 19 out of 30. As Chief Analyst of the Super Earth Equipment Testing Division, I would recommend the use of this loadout against the automaton threat, with the caveat that an alternative sentry choice would likely be a wise decision against this particular enemy. This concludes our 4th public report. Until next time, dive well, and long live democracy.